Hello there, welcome to Nerd.World, and today's video, as if you didn't know from clicking on the title, we are discussing the Genites, the Knights of Genetic Purity. Basically, Nazi terrorists from the future. Before we get started, if you like this video or any others on my channel, please like, share, subscribe and comment down below. It all helps out the channel. And without doing any more rambling, let's get started. The Genites were a splinter organization from another group known as the Templars that were founded by Admiral Constanza Stark in the wake of the fall of the Systems Commonwealth and the High Guard and the beginning of the Long Night after the Nietzschean rebellion against the Systems Commonwealth. The Templars existed to preserve Commonwealth values and one day hope to rebuild and restore the Systems Commonwealth to its former glory. But they held onto a nugget of hatred towards the Nietzscheans, blaming them for the fall of the Commonwealth, and would often go to war against them and fight them. The Genites were a splinter group within this organization of extremists that not only hated Nietzscheans but believed in the genetic degradation of the human race in general, and they believed that all genetically modified humans were degenerates and needed to be eliminated, that the human race needed to be purified. Now, Stark kicked these radicals out of the organization, believing them to be too extreme even for basically a fairly extreme group like the Templars to begin with. This was about 200 years before the events of the Andromeda series and the re-emergence of the Andromeda Ascendant and her captain, Captain Dylan Hunt. Now, the Genites initially went to war against Nietzscheans and any others. They would attack various Nietzschean prides, the various systems in their ongoing war to purify the human race of any genetically deficient humans by what they considered to be genetically deficient or genetically engineered. Now, in terms of the galaxy, the human race had been undergoing genetic modification for millennia by this point. There were whole civilizations, the Nietzscheans being one of the more prominent, who were genetically augmented humans who had selectively bred for thousands of years to become the Ubermensch, as they were sometimes known as Supermen. Physically, psychologically superior to a normal human. A race of warrior poets is what they were supposed to be. But there were others as well, other genetically engineered humans, including Captain Hunt himself, whose mother was a heavy worlder, basically meaning that her entire population of her world had been genetically engineered to live in a high gravity environment, meaning they were physically stronger than a normal human. In fact, the only human aboard the Andromeda who had no genetic modification in his genome was Seamus Harper, and he represented what was, by that century, only about 2% of the greater human population that were unaltered. This means if the Genites got their way, countless tens, perhaps even hundreds of billions of humans would be massacred, leaving probably still a substantial population of probably a few billion humans, but nowhere near what it originally was. Now, obviously, they're insane, but they also had at their disposal some pretty formidable technology, where they kind of looked like Imperial stormtroopers in all clad white armor, but it was pretty much invulnerable, and they were able to use this invulnerability. The great irony was that the Nietzscheans saw human kludges, as they often derogatorily referred to them, as inferior to them, but they were terrified of the Genites, who were just pure human. They utilized their advanced technology and scientific know-how and fanaticism to their advantage, being like the boogeyman to the Nietzscheans, wiping out entire Nietzschean prides such as the Condor Pride and the Lynx Prides later. Now, this caused the Nietzschean prides to unify temporarily in a great alliance to wipe out the Genites, which they believed they had done, and once they destroyed the Genites, the Nietzscheans descended back into internal strife. But a number of successor groups rose up, claiming to be descendants of the survivors of the Nietzschean massacre of the Genites. These groups slowly began to recoalesce and rearm, and many years later would re-emerge, although much less powerful than they had previously been, but once again began attacking particularly the Nietzscheans, but also any other genetically engineered humans that they considered to be inferior and in need of purging. But this time they avoided direct confrontation with the larger Nietzschean prides such as the Dragokatsov or the Jaguar prides, because they were large enough and powerful enough, despite the technological discrepancy between them, that they would simply be able to stomp the Genites out of existence. So they would target smaller prides such as the Lynx pride, which were too weak and not militarily strong enough to oppose them. They would also attack prides such as the Orca pride, successfully basically wiping out these prides from almost from existence. Eventually, the Templars themselves, who still harbored a great dislike of the Genites, would also have brief skirmishes and continuous conflicts with them, despite the fact that two factions believing that the Nietzscheans needed to be destroyed. The Templars were not against other genetically modified humans who had done nothing wrong. From a more rational standpoint, everybody else thought not all Nietzscheans were bad, so not all Nietzscheans needed to be wiped out. But obviously the Genites disagreed with that appraisal. When the Andromeda would encounter them with Captain Hunt, he of course took an instant opposition to their organization, and their arrogance and superiority, as their vessels were very powerful and equipped with some pretty decent weapons that were more than a match for the Andromeda, they had to be tricked into being defeated, and through their arrogance this was possible, as Harper was able to feign wanting to join them, defecting to their side, luring their ships into lowering their defenses, ultimately allowing the Andromeda to gain the upper hand. The Genites were not the power they once were, but they did have some pretty advanced technology. 300 years of technical development from where the Commonwealth had been at and the High Guard had been at the fall, utilizing fully realized versions of weapons and armor that the High Guard had only been dreaming about at the very height and apex of the Commonwealth. Meaning that, as I said, they were a match easily for the Andromeda. In fact, one of their ships was theoretically more powerful. What happened to the organization long term is unknown, but they were certainly weakened by their constant conflicts with the Nietzscheans and the Templars, and with the restored Systems Commonwealth. It's believed many of them were ultimately destroyed, although, like any race of cockroaches, kill one, there's probably 10 more hiding somewhere, and they may yet return one day in the future, as the Systems Commonwealth wasn't exactly restored to its former glory. The Genites may see this as, again, evidence of the corrupt genetically modified humans being part of it. Now, I hope you enjoyed that video. It's only a relatively quick one. Please like, share, subscribe and comment down below. Tell me what you think of the Genites. Do you remember them from the Andromeda series? They were one of my favourite factions, even though they did remind me of Imperial Stormtroopers. They look kind of similar, especially with their arrogant superiority over others. Humanity first, remember? Yeah, they were definitely a human-centric organization, if ever there was one in the Andromeda universe. That said, bye bye.